My son actually sued me in an attempt to steal my $18 million estate and gain custody of my grandkids. He had the nerve to sneer right in front of the judge. "You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old fool." Absolutely crushed, I escaped to the secluded mountain property that my late husband, Eli, owned. While I was cleaning, I stumbled upon a safe hidden behind the vintage stove. The combination turned out to be my birthday. Inside, I found a letter that started with, "If you're reading this, the moment of truth has arrived." But let me tell you the whole story of how I got to this moment, the moment that changed absolutely everything. My name's Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 67 years old, and until just 3 months ago, I honestly believed I had a family who loved me. My husband, Elijah, passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, leaving me a huge $18 million estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, along with several successful businesses. I thought my son Brandon, a 42-year-old successful attorney, would be my rock in my golden years. Boy, was I wrong. It all kicked off when Brandon came home with his wife, Tiffany, and the 8-year-old twins Ethan and Zoe. I was so happy living with my grandchildren. I watched them whenever their parents were working. I cooked their favorite foods and I took them to the park. "Mom, we need to talk," Brandon said one October afternoon with a seriousness that sent a shiver down my spine. Tiffany stood next to him, wearing a red dress that I always thought was a little too much, with a look on her face that I couldn't quite figure out. "What is it, honey? Is something wrong?" I asked, pouring coffee in my favorite living room, the one where Eli and I spent so many evenings talking about our dreams. "We've been watching you, Mom. Lately, you've been acting really strange. You forget things. You repeat conversations. You leave the stove on." I froze. It was true that I sometimes forgot where I put my keys or repeated a story, but that happens to anyone my age. It didn't mean I was losing it. "Brandon, those are just normal little memory lapses. Your father had them at my age too," I replied, trying to stay calm. But Tiffany leaned forward. Those calculating eyes that always made me uneasy were locked on me. "Eleanor, yesterday you gave the kids ice cream for breakfast. The day before, you forgot to pick them up from North Atlanta Academy. The principal had to call us." That wasn't true. I would never forget my grandchildren. But before I could defend myself, Brandon dropped the bomb that would shatter my entire world. "Mom, we've spoken with several doctors. We think you're showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease. This house is too big for you, and the children, well, they can't be put in danger." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Alzheimer's. Danger. What was my own son even talking about? "I don't understand, Brandon. Feel fine. I've cared for the children since they were born. I would never hurt them." Tiffany and Brandon exchanged a look that broke my heart. It was the look of two people who had already made a decision without even talking to me about it. "That's why we've decided the best thing is for you to move into a high-end assisted living facility," Brandon went on. "We'll sell the house to pay for your care, and the kids will stay with us permanently." My world just fell apart. My home, the one Eli and I built with so much love, the one that held 40 years of memories. They wanted to sell it and take Ethan and Zoe away forever. "No, Brandon, this is my house and those are my grandchildren too. I'm not going anywhere." But my son was no longer the loving child I raised. His eyes hardened in a way that scared me. "Mom, you can cooperate or we can do this the legal way. It's your call." That threat was the beginning of the end. In the weeks that followed, Brandon hired doctors who backed up his false diagnosis. He presented testimonies from neighbors who supposedly saw me acting strangely, and he took everything from me. The day of the court hearing was the most humiliating day of my life. Sitting in that cold room, listening to my own son describe me as a feeble-minded, dangerous elderly woman, I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. The trial was like a nightmare I just couldn't wake up from. I sat in the freezing courtroom, watching my own son destroy my reputation, word by word. Brandon was wearing his best black suit, the one I bought him for his birthday last year. The irony. Tiffany was in the gallery, wearing a shimmering gold dress that sparkled under the fluorescent lights, as if it were a celebration instead of my living funeral. "Your Honor," Brandon began in that professional tone I used to be so proud of. "My mother, Eleanor Hayes, is showing clear signs of advanced cognitive decline. She can no longer live alone in that $18 million mansion without posing a danger to herself and my children." Tears streamed down my face. How could he say those things about me? Me, who raised him alone after Eli worked 18 hours a day to build our empire. Me, who stayed up all night taking care of him when he had a fever. Who sold my own jewelry to pay for his law school tuition. I present to this court the testimony of Dr. Silas Thorne, a specialist neurologist who evaluated my mother last week. An older man stood up on the witness stand. I didn't even know him, but there he was, deciding my future with words I never thought I'd hear about myself. "After an exhaustive evaluation," the doctor said in a monotone voice, "Mrs. Hayes presents symptoms consistent with early-stage senile dementia, frequent forgetfulness, temporal disorientation, and episodes of confusion that could jeopardize her safety and that of minors under her care." "That's a lie," I yelled, jumping up from my seat. "I have never even met that doctor in my life." The judge banged his gavel. "Ma'am, maintain your composure, or I will have to ask you to leave the courtroom." My attorney, a young, inexperienced guy who barely cost me $5,000 because Brandon had frozen all my accounts, gently took my arm. "Mrs. Hayes, please sit down. This isn't helping." But how could I stay calm when I was hearing lie after lie? Brandon kept presenting evidence of my supposed dementia, testimonies from neighbors who claimed to have seen me talking to myself in the garden. The truth was, I was talking to Eli, visiting his memorial mentally while watering the roses he loved so much. "Your Honor," Brandon said, pulling out a thick folder, "I also present photographs of my mother's home. As you can see, there are clear signs of negligence and disorder that confirm her inability to maintain a safe household." The photographs were passed around. I recognized my kitchen, but it looked filthy, like someone had deliberately trashed it. My living room was piled high with old newspapers. My bedroom had clothes thrown all over the place. "Those photos have been doctored," I whispered to my lawyer. "My house never looks like that." But no one was listening. Brandon had planned everything perfectly. Then came the worst part. Brandon approached the stand, and with fake tears in his eyes that made me sick to my stomach, he began his final act. "Your Honor, it deeply pains me to be here today. I love my mother, but my children Ethan and Zoe deserve to grow up in a safe environment. Last month my mother forgot to pick them up from school. They were found alone at 7 o'clock at night, crying because they thought we had abandoned them." "Liar!" I shouted again. "I would never do that to my grandchildren." But Brandon continued his performance. "Last week she gave them adult medications, thinking they were vitamins. We had to rush them to the hospital to have their stomachs pumped." Every word was like a knife twisting in my chest. My own son was making up horrible stories about me to steal my inheritance. Tiffany also testified, using that sweet, fake voice she used at family gatherings. "Eleanor was always a wonderful mother-in-law, but she's changed so much lately. Yesterday she asked me the same question 5 times. The day before, she didn't recognize the children for a moment. It's very sad to see her like this. Lies. All lies." But the judge believed them. I could see it in his eyes, the way he nodded as he listened to every made-up testimony. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up with all the dignity I had left. "Your Honor, I raised that man sitting right there. I worked alongside my husband for 40 years to build everything we have. I have never put my grandchildren in danger. I love them more than my own life." My voice broke as I saw Ethan and Zoe's little faces in the gallery. They didn't understand why their grandma was crying in this strange place filled with serious people. Brandon was my pride. I sent him to the best university. I paid for his law degree. I supported him when he started his firm. And this is how he repays me, by inventing illnesses I don't have to take away what my husband and I built with so much sacrifice. But my words sounded like the ramblings of a desperate old woman. Brandon had planted the seed of doubt, And now everything I said seemed to confirm his version of events. The judge barely deliberated for 20 minutes. 20 minutes to destroy an entire life. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he said in a somber tone, this court determines that Mrs. Eleanor Hayes is not in a condition to administer her assets or maintain custody of minors. The gavel fell like lightning. Legal guardianship and asset administration are granted to Mr. Brandon Hayes, and permanent custody of the minors, Ethan and Zoe, is placed under his responsibility. The world just stopped. Brandon stood up triumphant, hugging Tiffany as if they had won the lottery, because that's exactly what they had done. They had won $18 million with lies. I went over to my grandchildren before they took them away from me forever. Grandma loves you so much, I whispered, hugging them as tight as I could, but Brandon roughly pulled me away. Get away from my children. You've done enough damage. And then came the words that would haunt my nightmares. You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old fool, he said, laughing just low enough for only me to hear, but with a cruelty I will never forget. I left that courthouse completely destroyed, without a home, without my grandchildren, without family, without anything. I walked out of that courthouse like a ghost. My legs were shaking so badly that I could barely walk. People looked at me with pity as I dragged my feet down the cold hallways that had witnessed my public humiliation. Brandon and Tiffany came out behind me. He had a look of satisfaction that made me want to throw up. She was carrying Zoe in her arms while Ethan walked hand in hand with his father. My grandchildren, the babies I helped raise, who knew my lullabies by heart, who ran into my arms every time they saw me. Bye, Grandma, Ethan shouted, trying to pull away from Brandon's hand to run toward me. But his father held him tightly. She's not your grandma anymore, son. Remember what we told you. The lady is very sick and can't take care of you anymore. Tears completely blinded me. Brandon, please. They're my grandchildren too. Don't do this to me. But he just kept walking as if I were invisible. Tiffany gave me one last look, and for a second, I saw something in her eyes that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't sadness or compassion. It was pure triumph, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. My lawyer came up to me with a look of defeat. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hayes. We did what we could, but the evidence against you was overwhelming. Evidence? It was all a lie. Brandon made up every single word. I know, but legally we couldn't prove it. Brandon is a very skilled attorney. He's been preparing this case for months, maybe years. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. Years. That meant my son had been planning to rob me for much longer than I realized. The next few days were pure hell. I had 1 week to move my things out of the mansion that had been my home for 40 years. 1 week to pack an entire lifetime into boxes. Brandon didn't say a word to me the whole time. He hired a moving company to pack my belongings as if I were a stranger. I walked through those hallways filled with memories, touching the walls where Eli and I had hung pictures of our family, where we had marked Brandon's height when he was a kid. Ma'am, the moving supervisor asked me, what should we do with this antique furniture in the basement? I went downstairs to see what he was talking about. In a dusty corner were the first pieces of furniture Eli and I bought when we were newlyweds. A wooden table he fixed with his own hands, chairs we painted yellow together one Sunday afternoon. Leave them, I said, my voice cracking. I don't have room for memories anymore. But Brandon appeared behind me, with that coldness that was now so familiar. Take everything. I don't want anything of hers in my house. His house was my house. The house Eli and I built brick by brick. The house where he was born, where he took his first steps, where we celebrated every one of his birthdays. Brandon, please, just let me keep some photos of you when you were little. Some memories of your father. He looked at me as if I were a pesky insect. I already told you I don't want anything of yours here. This house needs a deep cleaning after years of neglect. Neglect? I had kept that house spotless for decades. Every corner shone, every garden was perfectly maintained. But now Brandon was describing it as if it had been a dump. Tiffany appeared on the basement stairs, wearing tight jeans and a pink blouse that looked way too young for her 35 years. "Honey, the decorators are here. They want to start the main living room remodel." "Okay, remodel." Not even 3 days had passed since they got the house, and they already wanted to erase every trace of my existence. "Wait," I begged them. "At least let me say goodbye to the grandchildren. I haven't been able to explain what's happening." Brandon laughed with a cruelty I never knew he was capable of. "Explain what? That their grandma is crazy? We already explained it to them. The children understand that you need specialized medical help." "I'm not crazy, and you know it perfectly well. The doctors say otherwise, Mom. Now please finish packing and leave. The children get scared when you get hysterical." Hysterical? That word hurt me more than all the lies in the trial. Me, who was always a calm, thoughtful woman who solved every family problem with patience and love. Now I was hysterical for defending my home and my grandchildren. That night, I stayed in a cheap hotel near the airport. I had nowhere else to go. Brandon had frozen all my accounts for my own good, according to the judge. I only had the cash I kept in my wallet for emergencies. I sat on that hard, cold bed, surrounded by boxes with the few personal items I had managed to save, and I cried like I hadn't cried since Eli's death. But these weren't tears of grief for a natural loss. They were tears of betrayal, disbelief, and a wound that I knew would never fully heal. The next day, I remembered the Blue Ridge Mountain Retreat. Eli had bought that property 20 years ago when we dreamed of retiring to the country. It was about 2 hours from the city on 12 acres of land surrounded by mountains. We had only gone a few times because we were always busy with business, but Eli kept it because he said someday it would be our refuge. Maybe Brandon doesn't know it exists, I thought with a glimmer of hope. I hired a taxi that cost me $200, money I really couldn't afford to spend, but I didn't have any other choice. The driver looked at me strangely as he loaded my boxes into the car. "Moving to the country, ma'am?" "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain my whole story to a stranger. The ride was silent. I looked out the window as the city faded away, taking with it everything that had been my life until that moment. The skyscrapers turned into small houses, then open fields, and finally the mountains surrounding Eli's property. When we arrived, my heart just sank. The place looked abandoned, like no one had been there in years. The main house was small compared to the mansion, but it had a rustic charm that Eli loved. The wooden walls were faded, the windows were foggy, and the yard was completely overgrown with weeds. "Are you sure you want to stay here, ma'am?" the driver asked, seeing the look on my face. "Yes, I'll be fine here," I lied, paying him and watching him drive away down the dusty road. I was left alone in that complete silence. The quiet was deafening after so many years of living in the city. The only sounds were the wind in the trees and the distant chirping of birds. I unlocked the front door with the key Eli kept under a broken flower pot. The inside smelled like dampness and neglect. Furniture covered with white sheets looked like ghosts in the dim light. Everything was covered in such a thick layer of dust that my footsteps left prints on the floor. The first night was awful. There was no electricity. Brown water came out of the pipes, and every little noise startled me. I lay on an old mattress I found in the main bedroom, holding tight to the only photo I managed to save of Eli and me on our wedding day. What would he have done in my place, I wondered, feeling his absence like a physical pain. I spent the next few days cleaning. It was the only thing I could do to keep from completely losing it with all the thoughts in my head. Cleaning gave me a purpose. It made me feel useful when my entire world had lost its meaning. It was on the 5th day, while I was scrubbing the kitchen with all the strength I had left, that something changed everything. I had been cleaning since dawn, trying to keep my mind occupied to avoid thinking about Ethan and Zoe. I wondered if they missed me, if Brandon had told them I was dead, if they would ever understand the truth of what had happened. The kitchen was small but cozy, with wood cabinets Eli had installed himself. I remembered coming here on weekends and him always insisting on cooking for me, making those huge breakfasts he said would give me the energy for hiking in the mountains. I was cleaning behind the old stove when I noticed something strange. The stove seemed to have moved slightly from where it should have been. There were marks on the floor showing where it used to be, and now it was a few inches to the right. That's weird, I thought. Eli was always so precise about everything. I tried to move the stove to clean better behind it, but it was too heavy for me. I found a broom and used it like a lever, pushing it little by little until I managed to move it enough. And that's when I saw it. There, set into the brick wall, was a small but strong safe. The metal was shining, like it had just been installed, standing out against the old walls of the kitchen. My heart started pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Why would Eli have secretly installed a safe? What would he have kept in there that he hadn't told me about? The safe had a modern digital panel, which looked completely out of place in that rustic kitchen. It looked like the kind that opened with a 6-digit code. I stood there for a few minutes trying to figure out what I had found. Eli and I never kept secrets from each other. We shared everything: the bank accounts, the important papers, the business decisions. Why would he have hidden this from me? Maybe he was going to tell me, but he died before he could, I thought, feeling guilty for even questioning him. But my curiosity was stronger than anything else. I needed to know what was inside. I started by trying obvious codes. First, I tried our wedding date. 061582, June 15, 1982. Nothing. Then I tried his birthday. 122353, December 23, 1953. That didn't work either. I tried Brandon's birthday. 081181, August 11, 1981. The panel flashed red, meaning it was wrong. I sat down in an old chair in the kitchen, staring at the safe as if it were an impossible puzzle. What code would Eli have picked? He was a creature of habit, of numbers that meant something special to him. Then I remembered something he had told me so many times during our marriage. Eleanor, you are the most important thing in my life. The day you were born was the day the universe decided to bless me. With trembling hands, I entered my birthday. 031557, March 15, 1957. The panel flashed green, and I heard a metallic click that echoed through the silent kitchen. The door slowly opened, showing the inside of the safe. Inside were several folded documents, a small voice recorder, and what looked like a thick manila envelope. The first thing I took out was a letter with my name written in Eli's unmistakable handwriting. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped it as I unfolded it. My dearest Eleanor, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and something terrible has happened. If the moment of truth has arrived, it's because Brandon has finally shown his true colors. I sat down hard. Brandon showed his true colors? What did that even mean? Eli had died 2 years before Brandon sued me. How could he have known what would happen? I kept reading, my heart racing. For the last 5 years of my life, I discovered things about our son that broke my heart. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy the image you had of him. But now that I'm not here to protect you, you need to know the truth. The truth? Brandon had been a model son. Maybe a little distant in recent years, but always respectful, always successful. Eleanor, Brandon is not our biological son. The letters blurred in front of my eyes. I read the sentence once, twice, 3 times, but the words just didn't make sense. What do you mean Brandon isn't our son? I gave birth to him. I was in the delivery room. I felt every contraction, every pain. I know this will shock you as much as it shocked me when I found out. Brandon is the son of Tiffany and another man. Tiffany was pregnant when she met Brandon, but he never knew. She tricked him into believing the baby was his. My head was spinning. Tiffany met Brandon 10 years ago, long after Brandon was born. How could she be his mother? But then it clicked. The Brandon in the letter wasn't my Brandon. It was another Brandon entirely. A man Tiffany had manipulated years ago, making him believe he was the father of a child that wasn't biologically his. I continued reading, my heart pounding with a desperate need to know more. I discovered all of this by chance about 5 years prior when I hired a private investigator to do a thorough background check on Tiffany before our son even considered marrying her. What the investigator uncovered chilled me to the very bone. It turned out Eli had also investigated Tiffany. That explained why he never fully accepted her into our family, even though he was always perfectly polite to her face. Apparently, Tiffany had a history of failed marriages, and money was always at the heart of the problem. Her first husband was an older, wealthy, but very sick businessman. He died under extremely suspicious circumstances just 2 years after they got married. He left her a considerable inheritance, which he squandered in less than a year, going through it like water. Her second husband was Paul Jennings, a young, successful attorney, very similar to our own Brandon. Tiffany became pregnant almost immediately after marrying him, but the investigator discovered that she had been having an affair with another man for several months. When Paul Jennings requested a paternity test, Tiffany disappeared with the baby in the dead of night. My breathing grew more rapid and shallow. Tiffany had run away with a baby who wasn't even her husband's child. A baby who, Eleanor, that baby is the one we now know as our grandson, Ethan. Tiffany changed her last name as well as the child's. She moved to another city and started her life completely over. When she met our Brandon, she invented a sob story about being a single widowed mother. It was all a complete fabrication. Ethan and Zoe, my beloved grandchildren, weren't really my grandchildren at all. But the letter continued. Our Brandon fell head over heels for her and legally adopted the child as his own. He never knew that Tiffany had specifically chosen him because he had the exact same name and profession as the child's biological father. Tears began to stream down my face, soaking the paper and blurring the ink. Everything was beginning to click into place. The way Tiffany always seemed to be calculating something, always scheming. How she had insisted that Brandon legally adopt the child as quickly as possible. How she always looked at me with that strange, unreadable expression. But the worst of it, my love, is what I discovered next. My hands trembled violently as I turned to the next page of the letter. Eli had discovered something even worse. I mentally prepared myself for the next devastating blow, although I honestly didn't know if my heart could handle any more shocking revelations. Tiffany not only deceived Brandon about the child's paternity, but she has also been actively poisoning him against you since the moment they got married. I have found undeniable evidence that she has been meticulously planning to take our entire fortune for years, poisoning him against me. I immediately recalled all those subtle changes in Brandon that I had noticed over time, but had naively attributed to the normal stresses of marriage and early fatherhood. How he had gradually started to question my decisions, suggest that I was aging poorly, and even insinuate that maybe I needed to get some help. I found secret recordings of conversations between Tiffany and one of her friends where they were planning step by step exactly how to manipulate Brandon into declaring me mentally incompetent. Tiffany, it turned out, knew a whole network of corrupt doctors who were willing to sign off on any diagnosis for the right price. The air completely left my lungs. Tiffany had orchestrated absolutely everything from the very beginning. Every single doctor who testified against me, every false, carefully rehearsed testimony, every fabricated piece of evidence that had been presented in court. I also discovered that Tiffany had been subtly drugging me during our family dinners for at least the past 2 years. Tiny, precisely measured doses of medication that caused temporary confusion and memory loss. That was why I sometimes felt so strangely disoriented after visiting them at their house. I distinctly remembered those evenings at Brandon's house when I felt strangely dizzy and lightheaded after dinner. Especially when Tiffany insisted I have a second cup of coffee for digestion. How I sometimes forgot where I had put my car keys when leaving their house, or repeated a story without even realizing it. Tiffany had meticulously documented every single one of these episodes that she herself had been causing. She recorded videos of me acting confused and disoriented. She took photos of me when I looked particularly dazed or out of it, all to build her airtight case against me. Tears streamed freely down my cheeks. My own daughter-in-law, the mother of my supposed grandchildren, had been systematically poisoning me, both literally and figuratively, to steal my entire life. Brandon knows absolutely nothing about this, Eleanor. He genuinely believes you're sick because Tiffany has cleverly shown him all this false, manipulated evidence. She has manipulated him so skillfully and subtly that he is completely convinced that he is actually protecting you by taking away your independence. That revelation hurt even more than the rest, knowing that my son wasn't evil or malicious, but a victim of the very same woman who had destroyed me. Brandon really believed in his heart of hearts that he was doing the right thing. But there are more things you need to know, my love. Things that will completely change everything. More? How could there possibly be more after all of this? Tiffany doesn't just plan to keep your inheritance. She also plans to get rid of Brandon once she has total control of all the assets. My blood ran ice cold in my veins. Get rid of Brandon? What exactly did that mean? I've found concrete evidence that Tiffany has been investigating our family's complete medical history, specifically the heart issues that affected my father and me. She knows that Brandon has a genetic predisposition to heart attacks. Eli had died of a sudden, unexpected heart attack. His father had also passed away from one as well. Brandon had definitely inherited that predisposition, although up until now he had been perfectly healthy. Tiffany has been secretly buying medications that can easily induce heart problems if administered in the correct, carefully measured doses. I found them hidden in their house during a casual visit. Tiffany was actually planning to kill Brandon too. The woman was a complete and utter monster, far worse than I ever could have possibly imagined. Once Brandon dies, naturally of a heart attack, Tiffany will inherit everything as his grieving widow, and the children will be completely under her control. She will then have complete access to our entire fortune with absolutely no one left to question her motives. The plan was diabolical in its sheer simplicity. First, eliminate the inconvenient mother-in-law by having her declared mentally incompetent. Then, get rid of the husband once he had served his intended purpose. Finally, keep all the money for herself and use the children as the perfect sympathetic cover. Eleanor, if you're reading this letter, it means that the first part of her meticulously crafted plan has already succeeded. But I also have good news for you. Good news? After absolutely everything I had just read, it seemed virtually impossible that there could be anything even remotely good about this horrific situation. The entire fortune that Brandon falsely believes he inherited actually only consists of properties and virtually empty bank accounts that I put in his name specifically as a decoy to throw her off the scent. The real fortune, the $28 million, is safely secured in accounts and investments that only you know about now. 28 million? I thought our fortune was closer to $18 million. Eli had been secretly hiding even more money from me. In this safe, you will find all the irrefutable documents that prove that Tiffany is a fraud and a potential killer. You will also find the deeds to properties that Brandon doesn't even know exist, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and investments that generate over $500,000 a month. My hands trembled as I frantically searched the safe. Indeed, there was a thick manila envelope stuffed full of documents, deeds to properties in different countries, bank statements that show dizzying amounts of money, and investment certificates in various international companies. I also left voice recordings of Tiffany actually confessing her entire plan, photographs of the medication she bought to kill both you and Brandon, and a will that leaves everything, absolutely everything, entirely in your name. I found the small voice recorder that I had seen earlier. I turned it on with shaking hands and listened intently as Tiffany's cold, calculating voice spoke with someone on the phone. Yes, we're almost done with the old woman. The trial is next week. Once Brandon has complete control of everything, we'll begin phase 2 of the plan. The medications you got me will work perfectly. A heart attack during the stress of managing his crazy mother's assets will look completely natural. The voice was unmistakably Tiffany's, cold and utterly calculating, talking about my own son's impending death as if she were casually planning a vacation. More chilling recordings followed, Tiffany laughing cruelly as she described how she had been slowly drugging me during our seemingly innocent family dinners. Tiffany talking to the corrupt doctor about exactly what symptoms he should mention in his false testimony to make me sound as crazy as possible. Tiffany gleefully planning exactly how she would spend all the millions once Brandon was finally dead. The last document you will find, my love, is a letter addressed directly to the FBI. I have compiled all the undeniable evidence against Tiffany for fraud, attempted murder, and criminal conspiracy. The letter is completely ready to be mailed. It just needs your signature and the current date. I found the letter. It was addressed to the FBI's Atlanta field office, meticulously detailing all of Tiffany's heinous crimes with all the attached evidence clearly laid out. I have also prepared a complete legal strategy to reverse the absolutely unfair judgment. I have numerous contacts in the justice system who owe me some significant favors. With all of this concrete evidence, you will not only recover your freedom and all of your assets, but Tiffany will go to prison for the rest of her miserable life. My mind slowly began to process everything. Eli had not only discovered Tiffany's nefarious plans, but he had also meticulously prepared a complete counteroffensive. He had protected our true fortune, carefully collected all the incriminating evidence, and given me absolutely all the necessary tools to completely destroy the woman who had destroyed my life. But what struck me most deeply was realizing that Eli had died knowing all of this. He had lived the last years of his life carrying the immense burden of knowing that the woman we had considered our daughter-in-law was secretly plotting to destroy our entire family. "Why didn't you tell me when you were still alive?" I asked his photo, which I still carried in my wallet. We could have faced her together side by side. But deep down I already knew the answer. Eli knew me better than anyone else in the world. He knew that I would never have believed something so incredibly terrible about Tiffany without overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. I would have inevitably tried to confront her directly, talk to Brandon, and resolve things as amicably as possible, and that would have given Tiffany the perfect opportunity to alter her plans, erase the evidence, and disappear completely with the children. Now I finally understood why Eli had been so insistent that we install state-of-the-art security systems in the house. Why he had started storing copies of all of our most important documents in so many different places. Why he had insisted that I learn to manage our finances completely independently. He knew that someday I would be facing this incredibly difficult battle completely alone. I picked up the voice recorder again and listened once more to Tiffany's cold, calculating conversations. Her chilling voice, coldly planning Brandon's death, filled me with a white-hot rage that I honestly didn't even know I was capable of feeling. "The old man will never suspect a thing when he dies of an apparent heart attack," Tiffany had said, laughing cruelly. "Brandon will be so incredibly stressed managing his crazy mother's estate that it will be so easy to induce heart problems. The doctors will simply chalk it up to genetics and say it was completely inevitable." In another particularly disturbing recording, she spoke about the children with utter disdain. "The twins are absolutely perfect for generating sympathy and pity. Poor little orphans who desperately need stability. No one will ever question me keeping all the money to care for them. And when they finally come of age, well, accidents definitely do happen." She was actually planning to harm Ethan and Zoe too. The woman's malice and cruelty truly had no limits whatsoever. But there was one particular recording that especially caught my attention. It was Tiffany talking to someone about me. "The old woman is definitely stronger than I initially thought. She keeps resisting the effects of the drugs much better than most people would. But it doesn't even matter in the end. The damage has already been done. Brandon is completely and utterly convinced that she has advanced Alzheimer's disease. And if she somehow recovers after the trial," the other voice had asked, "she definitely won't recover because she simply won't get the chance to. Once she's finally admitted to that secure facility, a little accident will solve the problem forever." Tiffany had been planning to kill me too. Not just steal my house and take away my beloved grandchildren, but completely eliminate me from the equation permanently. I stood up from the kitchen chair with a newfound sense of determination that I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. Eli was absolutely right. Tiffany had definitely chosen the wrong family to deceive. I carefully reviewed all the financial documents that Eli had so meticulously left behind. The sheer amount of hidden properties and investments was truly staggering. We had luxurious houses in at least 3 different countries, shares in countless multinational corporations, and various bank accounts that generated millions of dollars in interest every single month. The sprawling mansion that Brandon had falsely believed he had inherited was indeed worth a staggering $18 million. But it also had a completely hidden mortgage of $20 million that Eli had secretly taken out years prior. Technically, Brandon had actually inherited a $2 million debt, not a vast fortune. The various bank accounts that he naively thought he controlled were, in reality, virtually empty. Eli had discreetly transferred all of the money to offshore accounts weeks before he died, leaving behind just enough money to maintain appearances and not raise any immediate red flags. The various businesses that Brandon was now running were nothing more than empty shells. All of the real contracts, the truly important clients, and all the profitable investments were cleverly hidden under various corporate names that only I knew about now. Brilliant, Eli, I murmured softly, smiling for the first time in what felt like ages. You gave them exactly what they deserved. Nothing but massive problems and crushing debt. But my smile quickly faded when I thought of Brandon. My son was being manipulated just as much as I was. He truly believed that he was taking care of his sick mother and expertly managing a legitimate inheritance. He had absolutely no idea that his seemingly loving wife was secretly using him and planning to kill him. I picked up the cell phone that I had bought just the day before and immediately dialed the first number on the list that Eli had painstakingly left for me. Reginald Reggie Stone, a highly respected lawyer who specialized in financial fraud and successfully reversing mental incompetence cases. Law Office of Mr. Stone, a polite secretary answered on the other end of the line. This is Eleanor Hayes, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Eli Hayes asked me to contact him if anything ever happened to him. There was a brief, almost imperceptible silence. Then, Mrs. Hayes, we have been waiting for your call for over 2 long years now. Mr. Stone will be able to see you immediately. Can you come into the office sometime today? I will be there in approximately 3 hours, I replied firmly. I carefully packed all the crucial documents, all the chilling recordings, and all the other damning evidence into a sturdy suitcase. For the very first time since that terrible trial, I actually took the time to dress carefully and meticulously. I put on my best black power suit, the one that Eli always said made me look powerful and utterly unstoppable. I painstakingly applied makeup to try to cover the dark circles under my eyes from all the endless crying and styled my hair with all the elegance and flair that I had somehow lost during those incredibly difficult and painful months. As I looked in the mirror, I finally recognized the woman who had always been strong, determined, and more than capable of facing any challenge that life threw her way. Tiffany had tried her absolute best to completely destroy that woman, but she ultimately hadn't succeeded. The journey back to the city felt completely different from the trip out. This time, I was definitely not a defeated, humiliated elderly woman fleeing her old life in utter disgrace. I was a fierce warrior, armed with incredibly powerful weapons, and preparing for the most important and difficult battle of her entire life. Mr. Stone's office was located on the 20th floor of a sleek, modern building in the heart of the bustling financial district. The distinguished man who greeted me at the door was actually older than me, with striking white hair and piercing, incredibly sharp eyes that immediately reminded me so much of Eli. Mrs. Hayes, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Eli was my very best friend. He told me absolutely everything before he died and specifically asked me to help you in any way possible when the time finally came. You actually knew what was going to happen? I asked in complete shock. Eli explained Tiffany's entire nefarious plan to me over 2 long years ago now. We have been carefully preparing your complete legal defense ever since. All we need now is your full authorization to formally proceed. He proceeded to show me a comprehensive legal strategy that he and Eli had painstakingly developed together over the past 2 years. First, they would present all the undeniable evidence of blatant fraud in the original trial, which would definitively prove that all of the damning medical testimonies had been bought and paid for. Second, they would publicly expose all the dangerous drugs that Tiffany had been secretly administering to me, which would completely explain all of my episodes of confusion and memory loss. And third, they would definitively reveal that Brandon had only inherited massive debts, not any vast riches or a huge fortune. But that's definitely not all, Mrs. Hayes. Mr. Stone continued with a determined glint in his eye. We are also going to proceed criminally against Tiffany for attempted murder, blatant fraud, kidnapping, and criminal conspiracy. Kidnapping? I asked, completely confused. The twins are actually not legally hers. When she adopted her younger sister's children, she forged all the crucial documents to falsely pose as their biological mother. The twins' real grandparents never gave their explicit consent for the formal adoption. He then showed me various official documents that Eli had somehow miraculously obtained. The real grandparents of Ethan and Zoe, Marcus and Delilah Jenkins, had been frantically searching for their beloved grandchildren for many long years. Tiffany had callously told them that the children had both died in the same tragic car accident as their daughter. They actually have the complete legal right to formal custody, the lawyer explained. And after absolutely everything that they have suffered, they are more than willing to share custody with you if it ultimately means getting those precious children out of Tiffany's clutches for good. My heart swelled with immense hope. Not only would I finally get my precious grandchildren back, but I would also finally get to meet another loving family who loved them just as much as I did. When do we start? I asked eagerly. Right now, Mrs. Hayes. Eli already had absolutely everything completely prepared. We just need your official signature on these various legal documents. I signed paper after paper, my hand barely trembling at all. There was the formal lawsuit to officially reverse the deeply unfair mental incompetence judgment, the explosive criminal complaint against Tiffany, the emergency custody request for the children, and the official claim for all the various assets that rightfully and legally belonged to me. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Stone said to me in a serious tone when I had finally finished signing all the documents. Are you fully prepared for what is about to happen? Tiffany will fight like a wild animal when she finally realizes that her meticulously crafted plan has completely fallen apart. I immediately thought of Eli and his extremely poignant last words in the incredibly detailed letter. You have everything you need to win this long and difficult war. Mr. Stone, I replied with a firm, confident voice that I hadn't used in months. Tiffany has absolutely no idea who she just messed with. The next day officially began the most deeply satisfying operation of my entire long life. Mr. Stone had expertly coordinated absolutely everything like a perfect symphony. At precisely 8 o'clock in the morning, a team of FBI agents officially knocked on the door of my old house with both arrest warrants for Tiffany and full search warrants for the sprawling property. I was patiently waiting in a car just half a block away, along with Marcus and Delilah Jenkins, Ethan and Zoe's real grandparents. We had all talked late into the previous night, crying together over all the precious lost years, over the beloved grandchildren that they had been falsely told were tragically dead, and over all the immeasurable pain and suffering that Tiffany had caused to so many different families. Mrs. Hayes, Marcus had said to me with tears streaming down his kind face, for 8 long years we visited our precious grandchildren's graves every single Sunday. Tiffany cruelly told us that they had been burned beyond recognition in the fiery car accident, that there was nothing left of them to bury. Delilah had then added in a broken, barely audible voice, we never stopped loving them, not even for a single second. We never stopped desperately looking for them. We somehow knew deep down in our hearts that something just wasn't right. Now, sitting in that car, we all watched as justice finally began to slowly unfold. Tiffany came storming out of the house in only a bathrobe, screaming like a complete lunatic as the FBI agents read her Miranda rights. Her piercing screams actually woke up the entire sleepy neighborhood. I could clearly see the visibly shocked faces of all the same neighbors who had eagerly testified against me in court. The same ones who had callously said that I was a dangerous, unbalanced, elderly woman who needed to be locked up for the safety of the entire community. This is all a huge mistake, Tiffany shouted hysterically as they roughly put the handcuffs on her. I haven't done anything wrong. The crazy one is the vindictive mother-in-law, not me. Brandon then ran frantically out after her, completely confused and bewildered, desperately trying to understand what in the world was happening. He was wearing only pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. His hair was completely disheveled, and he had the unmistakable face of someone who had just woken up in the middle of a complete nightmare. "Agent, there's clearly been a mistake," my distraught son yelled. "My wife hasn't committed any crime whatsoever. The one who desperately needs immediate medical help is my own mother." One of the FBI agents then calmly approached Brandon with a thick manila envelope in his hands. "Sir, we are going to need you to come with us to clarify a few things. Your wife is being formally arrested for fraud, attempted murder, falsification of official documents, and of course kidnapping." Brandon's face completely crumbled before my very eyes. "Kidnapping whom?" he asked in a bewildered tone. "The children who currently live in this house. It turns out that they are definitely not legally yours or your wife's." At that precise moment, Ethan and Zoe tentatively appeared in the doorway, understandably frightened by all the commotion and yelling. My precious grandchildren, my beloved babies with terrified faces, clearly not understanding why there were police officers arresting the woman that they had always believed was their mother. Marcus and Delilah immediately ran out of the car toward the children. They didn't even care that there were numerous FBI agents, several news cameras that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, or various curious neighbors recording everything with their cell phones. "Ethan, Zoe," Delilah cried out with tears streaming down her loving face. The two children froze as they saw those unfamiliar strangers running directly toward them. But then something truly magical happened when Marcus knelt down right in front of them and smiled warmly with those kind, gentle eyes. Zoe tilted her head slightly as if she were trying to remember something incredibly distant. "Grandpa Marcus?" the little girl whispered hesitantly. "Yes, my love. I'm indeed Grandpa Marcus, and this is your loving Grandma Delilah. We have been desperately looking for you for a very, very long time." Ethan seemed to recognize them too. The children had only been a few months old when Tiffany had so cruelly stolen them, but the indelible memory of true, unconditional love is never completely erased. Brandon was completely paralyzed, simply watching the entire scene unfold right before his very eyes. "I don't understand anything that's happening here. Who are you people? Why do the children seem to know you?" Then I finally got out of the car. The moment that Brandon saw me, it was as if he had seen a ghost. His face visibly shifted through complete shock, utter confusion, intense fear, and finally something that I honestly hadn't seen in his eyes for many long years. Intense shame. "Mom," he whispered in disbelief. "What in the world is going on here?" "What's going on, Brandon, is that your wife is a cold-blooded criminal who has deceived absolutely all of us, and now she's finally going to pay for all the immeasurable damage that she has so callously caused." Tiffany was still screaming hysterically as the agents finally put her in the back of the patrol car. "Eleanor, you vindictive old fool. This is all entirely your fault. You ruined my perfectly executed plan." "My fault?" The woman was such a deeply disturbed psychopath that even during her own arrest, she was still somehow blaming me for her own horrific crimes. The FBI agents then began carefully removing all the crucial evidence from the house. They found the various dangerous medications that Tiffany had been secretly buying to induce heart problems in Brandon. They found all the blatant forgeries of official documents regarding the children's false adoption. They even found a small vial of the drugs that she had been surreptitiously using to make me look feeble-minded and confused during those seemingly innocent family dinners. "Mrs. Hayes," the lead FBI agent said respectfully, "we now need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement. You have also been the completely innocent victim of your daughter-in-law's heinous crimes." My beloved son looked directly at me with eyes full of tears and immense regret. "Mom, is it all actually true? Was everything we said about you in court a complete lie? All of it?" "Yes, Brandon, all of it. Your manipulative wife was slowly drugging me to make me look sick and mentally unstable. She willingly bought false testimonies from corrupt doctors. She had meticulously planned absolutely everything for years in order to steal our entire money. But I saw the evidence. I saw you confused, losing your memory because she was poisoning me. Every time I ate at your house, every time she served me coffee or dessert, she gave me drugs that made me act that way." Brandon collapsed on the front steps. The guilt, the shame, the realization of what he had done, It all hit him at once like a ton of bricks. "My God, Mom, what have I done?" he cried. "I took your house. I took the children away from you. I humiliated you publicly, and it was all because of that woman." The children ran toward me. Grandma Ellie," they shouted, hugging me with that pure strength that only children have when they feel true love. "My babies," I cried, holding them as if I was afraid I was going to lose them again. "Grandma never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Tiffany told us you were very sick," Ethan said. "That's why we couldn't see you. She also told us you might die soon," Zoe added. "That's why we were so sad." Tiffany's cruelty knew no bounds. She had not only separated me from my grandchildren, but had psychologically tortured them by making them believe their grandma was dying. Delilah approached timidly. "Children, do you remember us? We are the parents of your real mommy, the one who is in heaven." Zoe nodded. "Mommy told us about you before the accident. She said you were the kindest grandparents in the world." Marcus took out his wallet and showed photos of Tiffany's younger sister, the twins' real mother. "This is your mommy when she was your age. See how alike you are?" The children looked at the photos with fascination. Indeed, they looked very much like their biological mother. "Tiffany never let us see them," Ethan whispered. "She said all the photos burned in the accident." Brandon approached slowly, still in shock. "Mom, can you ever forgive me? I know what I did is unforgivable, but I really believed that." "Brandon," I interrupted him, "you were also Tiffany's victim. She manipulated all of us, but the important thing now is to fix things." Mr. Stone arrived with more documents. "Mrs. Hayes, the judge has agreed to urgently review the mental incompetence case. With all the evidence we have, it will be reversed before the end of the week. And the house never legally stopped being yours. Brandon only had a power of attorney based on fraudulent medical declarations. When the fraud is proven, you will automatically recover all your assets." Brandon looked at me in surprise. "But what about the businesses I've been running? What about the bank accounts?" Mr. Stone smiled in a way that reminded me exactly of Eli when he had made a clever business move. "Mr. Hayes, I'm afraid your father was more astute than all of us. The businesses you've been running were decoys. The accounts you thought you controlled were empty. Your father protected the true family fortune long before he died." Brandon's face changed from shock to something like relief. "Dad knew what was going to happen," he murmured. "That's why he acted so strange in the last few months before he died. It wasn't because he was sick with his heart. It was because he knew what Tiffany was planning. Your father loved you, Brandon, but he also loved me, and he knew that if something happened I would need protection." In the distance, the police car with Tiffany drove away. But I managed to hear her last screams. "This is not over. You'll all pay." I turned to my son, to my grandchildren, to Marcus and Delilah, who were also victims of that woman's malice. "Oh yes," I murmured. "This is just beginning." The following days were like living in a movie about perfect revenge. Every one of Tiffany's lies crumbled one by one. Every diabolical plan came to light. Every person who had been deceived began to see the truth. The first devastating blow came when the FBI found the evidence Eli had mentioned in his letter at the house. Hidden behind a false panel in the master closet was a complete file with photographs, documents, and even videos that Tiffany had secretly taken of me during my drug-induced episodes of confusion. "Look at this," Special Agent Garcia told me, showing me some photos. "Your daughter-in-law meticulously documented every time you acted disoriented after drugging you. But what she didn't know is that your husband had installed hidden security cameras that recorded everything. The recordings clearly showed Tiffany putting crushed pills in your coffee, mixing powders in your food, and even applying creams to your hands that contained substances that made you tremble and appear sick. We also found her personal diary," the agent continued. "She documented every step of her plan for 3 years. She called it the Perfect Inheritance Project." The diary was chilling. Tiffany had calculated every last detail. How long it would take to convince Brandon that I was sick, which doctors would be willing to give false testimonies for money, She had even timed how long it would take to kill me once I was institutionalized. But the most shocking discovery was that I wasn't her first victim. Mrs. Hayes, Agent Garcia explained in his office, "We've been investigating Tiffany's past and found a pattern. She has done this before several times." He showed me a thick file with photos of different families. Her first husband, Edward Sanders, died of a heart attack at 50 years old, 3 months after changing his will to leave everything to Tiffany. Her second husband, Paul Jennings, the twins' real father, also died suddenly from heart problems after discovering the child wasn't his. She killed them all. We are exhuming the bodies for autopsies, but based on the drugs we found in her house and the methods she planned to use on your son, Brandon, we believe so. Tiffany was not just a fraudster. She was a serial killer who had perfected her method over years. Meanwhile, Brandon was living his own personal hell of guilt and repentance. He had resigned from his downtown law firm. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. The realization of what he had done was destroying him from within. "Mom," he said, crying when I went to visit him at the hotel where he was staying, "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me for something so terrible. I humiliated you publicly. I took your house. I took the grandchildren away from you whom you love so much." "Brandon, look at me," I said, taking his face in my hands as I did when he was a child. "Tiffany is a professional manipulator. She fooled doctors, judges, and an entire court. How were you supposed to realize what she was capable of? But I should have trusted you more. I should have investigated before taking you to court. I should have." "You should have married another woman," I interrupted him gently. "But we can't change that anymore. What we can change is the future." I told him about the real fortune Eli had protected, about the properties and investments that Brandon didn't even know existed. His face changed from shock to disbelief. "Dad had $28 million hidden? Your father was smarter than any of us imagined. He didn't just protect our money. He protected us too." But the real catharsis came when the official judge completely annulled the mental incompetence judgment. The hearing was a public spectacle. The same reporters who had covered my original humiliation now filled the courtroom to witness my vindication. The doctors who had testified against me were arrested for perjury and bribery. The neighbors who had given false testimonies were cited as prosecution witnesses against Tiffany. "This court," the judge declared with a solemn voice, "has exhaustively reviewed the case of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes and has found overwhelming evidence that she was the victim of the most elaborate and cruel fraud I have seen in 30 years of judicial career." The gavel fell, but this time it was in my favor. The verdict of mental incompetence is completely annulled. All assets are restored to Mrs. Hayes, and a complete criminal investigation is ordered against all participants in this fraud. The room erupted in applause. Brandon wept beside me, squeezing my hand as if begging for forgiveness. Ethan and Zoe, who now knew the whole truth, hugged me tightly. But the sweetest moment came when I returned to my mansion. Brandon had hired a cleaning company to erase every trace of Tiffany's presence. The decorators she had called were immediately dismissed. Every change she had made to my home was reversed. "I want the house to be exactly as you had it, Mom," Brandon told me as he supervised the work. "I want to erase every last vestige of that woman from our lives." The children were euphoric to have their real grandmother back. They ran through the house showing me everything Tiffany had changed, everything they had missed during those terrible months. "Grandma Ellie," Zoe said, "you won't have to live in that ugly country house anymore." "No, my love. Grandma is home forever now." Marcus and Delilah had decided to move to the city to be near their grandchildren. I gave them one of the properties Eli had bought years ago, a beautiful house just 10 minutes from mine. "Mrs. Hayes," Marcus told me with tears in his eyes, "we don't know how to thank you for giving us back our grandchildren." "Marcus, those children have enough love in their hearts for 4 grandparents," I replied. "We're going to raise them together the way it should be." The first family dinner back at my house after months was magical. Brandon had brought flowers. The children had made drawings to decorate the table. Marcus had cooked his late daughter's favorite dish, and Delilah had brought photos of the twins' real mother. "Let's raise a toast," I said, lifting my glass of wine. To Eli, who protected us even after his death, and to the true family which always finds its way, no matter how much time passes. But in the midst of all this recovered happiness, I knew the final chapter was missing. Tiffany had been arrested, but her trial was just beginning. The media were following the case obsessively. It had become the biggest scandal of the year. The daughter-in-law who tried to murder an entire family for money. "Are you going to the trial, Mom?" Brandon asked me. "I'm not just going, Brandon. I'm going to testify. That woman is going to hear from my own mouth what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust." The day I received the court summons to testify against Tiffany, I smiled in a way I hadn't smiled in months. It was the smile of a woman who had lost everything and got it back multiplied. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated by the wrong person. "Tiffany," I murmured, looking at the summons. "Now you're going to meet the real Eleanor." The children were playing in the yard. Brandon was helping with the dishes in the kitchen. Marcus and Delilah were telling stories about their daughter in the living room. My house was full of life, love, and the real family Tiffany had tried to destroy. But there was something else Eli had left in that safe that I still hadn't used. Something that would make Tiffany's fall even more spectacular than she ever imagined. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to use it. The day of Tiffany's trial arrived like the dawn after the longest storm of my life. I got up early, dressed in my most elegant suit, the same one I wore when Eli and I went to the most important business meetings. Today, I was not just Eleanor, the grandmother who had recovered her family. Today, I was the woman who was going to close the most painful chapter of her life forever. Brandon accompanied me to the courthouse. Neither of us spoke much on the way. He knew this day was crucial for my complete healing. And I knew he needed to see Tiffany receive her punishment as much as I did. The courtroom was packed. The media had turned the case into a media circus. "The Black Widow who fooled an entire family," the newspapers headlined. "The multi-million-dollar fraud that shocked the nation," the television news reported. When Tiffany walked in handcuffed, I was shocked by her transformation. The elegant, manipulative woman I had known no longer existed. Her hair was messy, her face haggard, and her eyes held that desperate look of someone who knows their world is crumbling. But when she saw me in the gallery, something in her gaze changed. For a second I saw a flash of that cold cruelty she had concealed for years. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "the state will present compelling evidence that the defendant, Tiffany Sanders, perpetrated one of the most elaborate and cruel frauds in the history of our justice system." For the next few hours, I listened as all of Tiffany's crimes were exposed. The medication she had bought to kill me and kill Brandon, the falsified documents about the children, the purchased medical testimonies, the recordings where she planned our deaths as if it were a shopping list. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up with all the dignity Eli had taught me during 40 years of marriage. "Mrs. Hayes," the prosecutor said, "can you describe to the court how you felt when you discovered that the woman you considered your daughter-in-law had been systematically poisoning you?" "Your Honor," I replied, looking directly at Tiffany, "I felt as though I had lived with a venomous snake for years without realizing it. But I also felt proud that my husband had been smarter than her." Tiffany glared at me, but I continued. "This woman not only tried to steal my money and my house, she tried to steal my grandchildren, my dignity, my sanity, and finally my life. But what hurts me the most is that she was willing to kill my son, a man who sincerely loved her, just out of greed." "What would you say to the defendant if you could speak to her directly?" The judge gave me permission to address Tiffany. I stood up from my seat and walked toward her. Her eyes followed me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "Tiffany," I said in a clear, strong voice, "you thought you had chosen the perfect family to scam. An elderly widow, a trusting son, helpless children. You thought we were easy victims." She tried to interrupt me, but the judge silenced her. "But you made a fatal mistake. You underestimated the power of true love. Eli loved me so much that he protected me even after his death. Brandon loves me so much that he is destroyed by the guilt of believing you. And those children you tried to separate from me love me so much that they never stopped asking about their grandmother. Tears began to stream down Tiffany's cheeks, but they were not tears of repentance. They were tears of rage for having been discovered. And now, I continued, pulling out the last document Eli had left in the safe from my purse, I want you to hear this. I handed the paper to the prosecutor. It was a complete confession Eli had managed to secretly record from Tiffany, where she admitted to killing her previous husbands and meticulously detailed exactly how she planned to kill Brandon and me. When the recording began playing in the courtroom, Tiffany completely collapsed. Her cold, calculating voice filled the court. The idiots never suspect anything when they die of heart attacks. It's the perfect crime, and when Brandon dies, I'll have almost $30 million and 2 children who will earn me pity for the rest of my life. The room erupted in whispers of horror. Even the judge seemed shocked by the coldness of her words. That recording is illegal, Tiffany shouted. Eli Hayes had no right to record me without my consent. Ma'am, the judge replied with a stern voice. When you were on private property planning murders, you lost any expectation of privacy. Tiffany's defense attorney, who had been fighting an impossible battle from the start, finally gave up. Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea to guilty on all counts. But Tiffany stood up furious. No, I am not pleading guilty to anything. That family owes me everything I have. Brandon was a loser before he met me. The children were orphans nobody wanted. And the old woman was wasting a fortune. Her words sealed her fate. In that moment, the entire room could see Tiffany's true psychopathic nature. There was no repentance, no remorse, just rage at being caught. The judge did not need to deliberate much. Tiffany Sanders, this court finds you guilty of aggravated fraud, attempted first-degree murder, falsification of documents, kidnapping, and criminal conspiracy. I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel fell with a sound that resonated like music in my ears. Tiffany was dragged out of the courtroom screaming threats. This is not over. You'll all pay, especially you, Eleanor. But her screams faded into the distance as I remained standing victorious, surrounded by my true family. Brandon hugged me, crying, Mom, I can never forgive myself for putting you in danger. Brandon, I whispered in his ear, you didn't put me in danger. You saved me. If you hadn't married her, if we hadn't lived through all this, we never would have discovered that Eli left us an even bigger fortune. We never would have met Marcus and Delilah, and we never would have truly learned to value what we have. The following months were about total reconstruction. Brandon returned to practicing law, but now he specialized in helping victims of family fraud. Marcus and Delilah became the grandparents the twins had lost, and I became a stronger woman than I had ever been. With the full fortune Eli had left me, I established a foundation to help elderly victims of family abuse. I called it the Elijah Hayes Foundation so that no family would ever again be destroyed by greed. Ethan and Zoe grew up surrounded by true love, knowing the story of their biological mother, proud to have 4 grandparents who adored them, and understanding that real love has nothing to do with blood, but with the heart. One afternoon, 5 years after the trial, I was in my garden watching the grandchildren play when Brandon approached with a smile. Mom, do you know what day it is today? The anniversary of something good, I hope. It's the exact anniversary of when Tiffany was sentenced to life imprisonment. I stayed silent for a moment, thinking about everything we had lived through. You know what, Brandon? I don't even remember anymore. That woman is no longer a part of our lives. And it was true. Tiffany had become a shadow of the past, while we had built a future full of light. That night before sleeping, I picked up the photo of Eli that I always keep on my nightstand. Thank you, my love, I whispered. Thank you for protecting me, for teaching me that true love transcends even death, and for reminding me that I should never underestimate my own strength. Never underestimate the silence of a humiliated woman, because one day she can rise stronger than she ever imagined. And when that happens, the entire universe conspires to bring justice. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.